Hey everyone, it's Lewis, and I just want to say thank you for watching. Steve and I really appreciate that you're into this podcast. We love that there are other people out there around the world that want to talk about the same nerdy stuff that we do. So please, if you have a question for myself or Steve about CRTs, about repairing them, about getting them, about pro monitors, or about any retro gaming topics in general, please leave them in the comments and we will get to them in the next podcast. We don't have some united place where you can definitely write the questions. We're not Bob here, but just write them somewhere. I promise you we'll find them, and we will do our best to answer them on the next podcast that we record. And also, what I really want to hear is, I personally want to hear experiences from people around the world about how you got your pro monitors. So Steve has done an excellent job with his Market Watch series, and he's able to get trends and averages, and he does it every few months, showing us how the market is generally moving. Now, Steve can do that, one, because he's done a lot of research, but two, because they've got eBay as one united selling platform to get that data, and in the continental United States, there's reasonable shipping. You know, Steve would probably disagree with me, but there's there's more shipping options than we've got. But if you go to Europe, disparate countries, there's no one place to look for those deals. There might be united shipping. Yeah, you can have the UPS or someone else between countries, but still, it's not as easy as it is in the States. And I think that internationally, pro monitors are obtained much more by word of mouth, contacts, people you know, and not so much like faceless online transactions. Maybe you saw an online ad, then you went and met the bloke, but not so much with these shipping things, not like it is in America. So we want to build up these stories, because even for me, I live in Estonia. That's, Eastern Europe, former Eastern Europe, however you want to say it. And I got a new BVM today. I found it locally, and I think it came from the same lot that the other BVMs that I have came from. Because look, there wasn't that many companies around here who actually were needing pro monitors. Late 90s, even year 2000. Estonia had only been independent from the USSR for like 10 years. It's not a lot, relatively a lot of time to build things back up. So there was only like one or two companies locally who would have been using such monitors at the very high end like this. So there's only a few places they could have come from. And I feel like that's a lot of the story in smaller places all around the world, not just Europe, that there's one or two companies, word of mouth, and that's how we're finding them. So please tell us your stories about how you're finding BVMs. You got those technical questions, leave them for Steve and I in the comments. We'll find them. And thank you very much for watching. Let's get on with the next podcast. We're all talking about Steve's Mr. Adventures. Oh, that's my phone. That's Steve right now. Let's do it. Hi, everyone. Episode 2, Lewis and Steve just talking about tech retro CRTs. We just did episode 1. We're rolling into episode 2 because we thought, why not? Let's keep going. And let's dive straight into it, Steve. Let's go back to talking about RGB modding TVs. And not only are we trying to talk about the technicals, yes, to give people some insights as to, we've talked in the last episode about jungle chip, and you got to connect the different pins and identifying, and there's so many kinds of them. So you give them really good technical details, but then overview of like...
kind of like where it goes to, like what?
Well, the conclusion that I'm going to bring us to, I'm trying to bring us around to, is that this is too hard for most people to do.
Yes.
And not to be a dick about it, but like it's something that, because, okay, maybe a small pompous European in me goes, ha ha, we already have the SCART, ha ha. No.
Yeah, you do.
You cannot have.
But you do have PAL, right? So that's a trade-off,
True,
I guess.
50 hertz.
So,
we have
yeah,
amazing, but it can only be 50.
But yeah, you're right. It is really not, I mean, when you, again, this is like I was saying kind of with RGB modding a component television we talked a little bit about before. It's not, unless you like really do it and love to do it, it's something you really shouldn't mess with. But what I mean, when you need to have a good amount of experience to be able to do this. The first problem is there's really not a plethora of people able to even do this mod as a service or as a fee. Personally, even myself, I have to take time out of a schedule to work from something that would be on a professional monitor, just servicing it, to take the time to even do a mod. And again, every mod just about is custom depending on how the board is set up and the signal that you may need to attenuate. And that's
what I also think makes
very, very technical stuff right there.
Sure.
That you do.
But you know what I think makes a difference, right?
To get into it.
You have to have some experience. And I think that, however, I do think that there's quite a number of modders and people out there that I see who could do it, who could theoretically get in the middle of it.
They have the skill.
Have the skill, but who are the ones that are accepting CRTs?
Right.
Hey, ship me a CRT. Oh, I'm going to ship you out a CRT. Not many people want to do that shit.
No, and again, since it's a custom job, it's not like where you can go to Voltar's mod shop and order, all of these specific consoles, and he can sit there and pump them out and do like a master level quality on his work for a console that he's put all this effort into designing and learning. Whereas with if you brought a specific television, it could be one that I've repaired hundreds of TVs, and it could be one that I've never even seen before, right? And then all of a sudden, I'm spending time researching the actual TV, how it works, what am I going to do, where are you going to insert this? There's a lot of time, and it's very often. Think about that. If you professionally hired somebody who was at the top of their field to do that kind of level of individual work, you're talking about a lot of money, and it's not even if I feel like sometimes, unless you're just totally experienced with it and you find somebody in your area who does it all the time and almost offers, you'd be better off finding somebody who offered to sell ones they'd already done than to RGB mod your own TV. I think that the real, because again, think about it. Even if, let's say you did find somebody that did offer the service.
Okay.
The odds of them being within driving distance of you is pretty low, right? And
who's within 6 hours of Steve?
Right.
Yeah.
And again, what if you're not 6 hours? What if your only option is to ship? Then the shipping and freight costs right now and the risk, you're talking about spending hundreds of dollars just in transportation. And then you're, at the end of the day, this is all a machine that some people are still throwing out. If it's a consumer grade, television that you're going to be modding. So there's a big come to reality moment, I think, when it comes to this. There's the biggest thing is with that is it's pretty much something that most of the time, I'd say 80% of the time, these are things people have to do on their own. So that becomes more of a progression on how do you get into this, because it doesn't take the most expensive tools, but you do have to have some pretty decent tools to be able to do this properly. And also, you don't just go in and immediately RGB mod a TV set. You really should sit there, and if it's one like these from the early 90s or mid 90s, you're considering doing that, you should go through and even before that, clean it and recap the thing, and then test it and make sure it's working well, everything on it, and get it to the point where it's in good condition so it's actually something worth RGB modding. But all that does is that gives you that experience and comfortability level working on these machines. Because again, guys like Voltar, they have absolutely the skills. Plenty of guys have the absolute skills to do this kind of board work. It's just such a specific thing that a lot of people don't want to mess with a CRT. Yeah. It's dangerous. It's big. They're dirty. I mean, it's a big deal. And most of the time, people... it's not something that you can simply do. Like, again, N60, like if you have one of these 3 million N64 consoles, this is the way you RGB mod it. And it's actually pretty easy compared to most RGB mods. I believe that was the first RGB mod I ever did was an N64, probably.
You had one of those. The secret with those ones that I've discovered is that every Japanese N64 is the easy to mod version.
Really? Yeah. See, I didn't even get to see when I did that. It was pretty easy to still find the right serial numbers. There weren't a lot of people doing it. Right. And
so people can just.
But it's. I mean, comparatively, like you see, when I started, it was like a progression of. I started with Ataris, the 2600s, working on those. That's how I cut my teeth, working in soldering and circuit board fixes, because you can easily work on it and tell if you've done something right pretty simply. And you're not going to mess up too many Ataris that anybody really would care about. There's so many of them. So that was what I got started with. But you move from that and you're like, well, then now I have enough skill to attempt working on the Super Nintendo, the N64. And then you get through that and you're like, well, now maybe I want to try that Nintendo RGB mod, because the NES RGB mod for the longest time was ridiculously expensive and difficult to get it done. I mean, you're talking about with parts, you were lucky to not pay more than $400 to $500 to have it done professionally by somebody and to have them ship it back and forth to you, recap it. And you're investing that kind of money into these single devices. And it's, again, that's a Nintendo. What if you have the same level of experience, but then you have triple the shipping costs, right? Because it's a TV. And then, there you go. Technically, that is the same kind of thing. People are willing to put that money into a $50 Nintendo console, right? But are they always willing to do that with a $50 television or less? It's not
true. We
at
don't
the end of the day,
do
you just live with it? But you do get significant quality increase, especially on those older TVs I mentioned, the ones that don't have component video inputs. The one that I have right now that I'm going to be doing work on, it has at best composite video. So it will greatly increase the quality of video on there. It will turn it into a almost PVM, not as sharp, but it will still show scan lines in that PVM fashion. And it will still have a little bit of a composite look, but it will be, so there's the option. If you can do all this yourself and progress to that point where you do this for yourself and you pull it off with a TV like this, then you don't have a lot of money invested. You've learned a good skill. You have tools. Or your options are, again, to pay so much money that then you start to look at, maybe it is better for me to go spend $1,200 to $1,500 on a good serviced PVM medical monitor, that does RGB and does everything that I want, as opposed to paying, half that to get something RGB modded and serviced completely, and
you're right. It was a really good point that you made, that before, the RGB mod is such a thing, such a ordeal, that you better make sure that this TV is top notch. That you got to recap, so you got to recap it. Is this TV worth your time and investment? Is it going to be all right? So you've got to do all of that, and then think about RGB modding it. Don't mod it before you replace all the caps.
And like you say, that is generally speaking, if you fully recap those TVs, you're still going to run into probably 50 to 100 capacitors on there, that if you're serious about doing that, then you could. You'd have, the good thing is you're getting hours and hours of experience right on your exact circuit board that you're trying to think about so you can, you definitely gain confidence. But it needs to be reiterated probably that this is a kind of thing that, most of the time you're going to do your own servicing like this, and that's going to take a lot of people out of the game. I don't think that until we get to the point where it's pretty much impossible to get a RGB monitor like a PVM or BVM, will there be a serious market for and there's still it's supplemented enough by everything else. It's like, well, at the end of the day, is there so much wrong with having a couple of good working consumer sets? Again, I feel like you'd be better off having the good consumer sets, and then using, if you have a desire using a scaler, you're going to get, you'll have a better combination, I feel like, right at your fingertips by, I know I don't want to hurt my own industry kind of, but it's just there's not enough techs out there offering this service. So when it happens, it's expensive and it's difficult to find someone to do it. So you're going to have a better experience concentrating on getting a very good television, and then investing in either recapping it yourself or having somebody that will recap a TV. That's different than just RGB modding it. You can always recap something, and it's like, well, you can get a pretty good rate for that.
Because
and you know
anything,
what it
it's
is.
just a
So,
circuit board. They're
it's
just recapping a circuit
board. So
Right.
it's not that big of a deal. They're not designing something different, and so I think if you're willing to do that and then invest in a new piece of technology like a good scaler, there's so many good options there that you can really get an awesome experience where you're not missing out on a whole lot, and you're also diversifying your collection a little bit. And
I think so too. It's good to just like get the reality. I think we all need a bit of reality check. You mentioned that
it's cool, and I think it's an awesome, like, if you're into circuit board stuff, I think it's an awesome goal to have, to be like, I want to do this, and then meet that goal, and then you're like, well, what's next on that mountain, right? And it's like, okay, for me, it was always that kind of stuff. That's how I got into any of this, and working on circuit boards was the Atari. Then I get familiar with that, and like, what am I going to do to up the game? Another console. Something else, try something else. And then, like, I remember the most difficult one I did was finally the Ultra HDMI mod, where it's that ribbon cable.
Very fine.
And after I did that, I was like, well, I'm glad I did that, and it worked, and I don't want to do it again. So now when I get a kit with the ribbon cable in it, most of the time I will send that off to a friend who does that all the time. And he is better at it and more confident in his skill, where I'm more confident in removing capacitors, because I do that, 70 times in a whatever. It's like a ton of capacitors coming in and out, so I can do that really quickly. But as far as like that tiny surface repair work, I'd just as soon, unless it's something that I've, again, set myself down to actually want to do. There's a lot of people that can do a good job, and I believe in supporting everybody that does good work. And there's plenty of people that do good work, and that's why they're sticking to modding those consoles, because they do good work at that. They get good technique, and then it is super easy, to ship those little consoles back and forth and get a lot of business going. There's a lot of people that actually do that, so there's a more of a marketplace for that. So that's why a lot of the guys that are modding are busy doing that.
It seems to be every modder is full months ahead.
And then anybody who does like stuff like me, it's like I've got a constant 60-day queue of just people lined up where you can never tell what you're going to be working on. That's the biggest thing with me, is I can't tell what's going to be in here next week most of the time.
And you also you don't, I guess, like, I mean, maybe it's like if someone came in to repair their fine car or something, you don't know how long it's going to take to do that.
Well, and you don't know what parts could be wrong.
Okay.
If you have one that's, if it's working good, then there's a good chance it's not going to take as long. But if there's any issues with it, you could be there forever. Especially, like I said, parts situations now, everything is getting crazy to get repaired. Even if you do get a car repair, if the parts aren't there, then right now you're going to be waiting longer than normal. So it doesn't really matter what the service is. And
so what do you think, before we move on from one more thing about the mods, you had mentioned that there is a possibility of S-video mod. Is it the same? Is it connecting into the jungle chip? Is it the same thing, just different points?
Yeah, and there's different ways to do it. I've not done that mod, but there's a now see, this is kind of like which I've been thinking about this. If you're into the retro gaming scene, I've kind of surfed between every major form of social media, and honestly, it seems like the most active from everything that I've been doing the last couple of years is definitely Twitter, where you can find people working on these projects. And there's a couple guys that post their CRT work a lot of times. So there's a guy on there that I talk to regularly named Andy King, and he does a lot of he's in California. He does a lot of S-video mods, and I was asking him about it because he runs into the situation where it's not as simple. Maybe the jungle chip isn't right, and it doesn't have everything needed from that jungle chip on some of these chassis. But there is a luminescent, there's a Y chroma and a luma separator on the jungle chip, so you can tap into that instead of. Okay. So, and instead of, it's a little bit simpler because, when you're tapping into that RGB signal, you're attenuating RGB and then you're running
NS.
lines to sync, and then all you're doing for that is on the S videos, you're just going to Chroma and Luma. That's all you need, and then you can sync on Luma, I think, or probably composite sync. I've not tried it. I'm interested in seeing that, but the TV I got is the chassis that's actually better for RGB mod than the S video mod, but it is very possible. But it does involve the same. You still have to attenuate your signal properly, so it's not something that generally you can. So that's a lot of things. Is you can actually sometimes get the signal to produce, and then you might have to adjust it a lot after that, and that's so that happens. But there definitely is a process for adding S video, just like RGB, and a little bit less work because there's less hardware.
But still, you have to have that specific knowledge. Still, it's probably going to be you doing it yourself.
It surprises me that people would put that amount of time into it unless it's not able to be RGB modded. Because you're like, well, because I was looking at it and I was like, well, I guess you're right. I could S video mod this, but at the end of the day, it seems like to me just as much. It's just there's a couple more wires to solder. It's not really like less work.
Okay.
It's not, and unfortunately, I think that the thing that everybody would like to have is kind of a universal kit, right? It would be awesome if you could just have an RGB kit, and I have no idea how that would ever happen. I mean, I'm not smart enough to come up with that, but maybe somebody will someday. But that's why the RGB mod scene on a television is a little bit more. There's not as many people doing it. It's just, again, more specific. It's more. There are a couple guys who do it, but it's
if you don't live in near
it's more just like one thing. It's like, well, that's the thing you got to be really into, and it's not unless you had a store where you could literally just send your RGB modded. I mean, that would be great if you could, but
it's just such a niche.
Who's going to pay? It's such a niche, and again, like I said,
it's a niche within a niche.
People do think obviously PVMs and pro monitors are expensive, but when you start thinking about, well, should I spend that level of money investing into a consumer grade CRT that's just RGB modded? Is that a little wild sounding? Yeah, probably. I mean, it's nuts too. It sucks again dealing with shipping. It's like the worst thing to have to deal with is shipping a TV or monitor that is larger than basically 10 inches in screen size is just stressful always. So, but that's kind of what I think about the RGB mod thing. Is
so I think
that's some good notes on it.
I think we've been through it, so we get it now, where things are at and the possibilities. And all right, it's nice. So what do we got? Well, we're going to talking about what you're doing with the Mistercade. So
I think that moving on to like this Mistercade. So I don't know if maybe you want to take a second and speak to because you've been using a Mister, right, for a while.
So
how long have you had your Mister?
Couple years, maybe a year and a half, 2 years. I don't know, something like this, right? I've got the Mister I/O board connecting into my PVM. I like the optical out. Actually, I've got some optical in. I've got a nice. Because my BVM doesn't have speakers, obviously, I've got a Sony boombox, a silver one that fits almost on top of the BVM, and it also happens to have an optical input, this model, so I can take the optical output straight out of the Mister, straight into my boombox, and that's my retro setup. But I do want an arcade machine. I have no room in I don't know. We
it's all dependent on the space you have for the arcade.
I got
room.
this dinky little room, so because I do know that there is a guy who runs like a private arcade in Helsinki, Finland, which is not so far, a couple of hours on the boat. I can be there in a couple of hours. And last time I checked his website, he was selling an Astro City for 800 euros. And I think
that's actually good.
I think it's good.
That's actually a good price,
especially considering it's here. Like
that's like
it's not imported.
The last I'm on these arcade buddies that deal in these things, and the last one went in like an hour for $1,500.
Dang.
Here.
So I don't know. Maybe it's an old deal, but I'm still like, I want the Astro City. Yeah. But I literally have, it would just go straight into my storage, I guess. Yeah. Hey, girlfriend. Hey, you know what I'm
Right.
gonna do,
Hey.
girlfriend? I'm gonna spend 900
You're paying-
euros, probably 1,000 by
And
the
then you're
time we go
paying-
back for something that's going straight into my storage room. What a good
Right.
investment. That is-
Well, that's why I was so pumped to get my
Yes.
Neo Geo for the first time inside my house. Again, it was just like that 36-inch JVC D series TV. It had never been inside my house. It had just been stuck out in the garage.
So it's a big
and
red
you can't-
Neo Geo cabinet.
Yeah, so you can't. You couldn't play it obviously if it got below a certain temperature because too you're messing with a CRT, so you can't like run it when it's cold, even if you get bundled up, which I always thought was funny.
So is it that your
but yeah,
garage
it's-
is not heated? Is that the thing? Like it was in the
Well, no, it was never heated, and then so you just it would just sit there dormant for half the year. But now it's like the other side of the room from me, and we were talking Mistercade and the Mister. So the Mister, I had never. I was so late to the Mister party, right? I mean, it is such a cool device. It's really blown me away how cool it is now. My friend, I had some friends who were talking to me about this again over 2 years ago. And I ran into Smoke Monster at a conference one time, and that's all I talked to him about for like 20 minutes was the Mister. Again, like over 2 years ago, before any pandemic or anything. This was a long time ago because he was always there talking about the Mister online. And so I was always really intrigued by this thing, and I was like, well, I'm so late to the party now. I'm going to just wait for this Mistercade. And, of course, the coolest thing I saw was when Bob took that from RetroRGB. He made, which may be something you would consider, he made, a countertop Mistercade where it was a countertop size. And I'm not sure what size the monitor, I don't really remember, but it might even be 13 to 15 inches or something. But he built that, and then I saw a couple other videos on the Mistercade, and then it just kind of went dormant because it's just these outliers like the RetroTink 5X, just craziness. Well, yeah, I've met Mike a few times, and yeah, he's definitely 100% professional. It's surprising that he's even in this industry. I figured that was the issue. The Mistercade, I heard about it, heard about pre-orders for it, and it went on sale, and then it was just sold out, right? Will release, I think it even said this last summer, so we're past summer now. And so I just... if I was on Twitter again, so we're talking about social media, and this would have not happened if I wouldn't have been on Twitter. So again, these kind of things, you can miss out easily on this stuff if you're not just somehow following some people. So Mr. Add-ons is on Twitter, and I've been following him since I got on there, and we've connected over just CRT stuff, posting CRT pictures, and he ran a contest giving away a Mister, I think about a month ago, and I was like, oh, man, I'd love to have a Mister, and he's like, I'll give you one, and I'm like, no, give it away to somebody else, and I'm like, so don't do that. I was like, just give me, and he's like, oh, but I really like your work, and so I was like, well, okay, thank you, maybe I'll hit you up for something. So about a month went by after that, and finally I sent him a DM, and I said, man, how can I get one of these Mistercades? I was like, I need one. And basically the reason I need one is because I have my MVS 4-slot Neo Geo machine. And the problem with the machine is the 4-slot cartridge reader, it has a bunch of issues on it. It's like got trace issues, RAM issues that have popped up over the last year of using it, where it would just not boot half the time, even with new cartridges. And I've just got frustrated dealing with the machine. So I pulled out the boards, and I'm like, well, I'll just send those off to another person I know who works on these all the time, and because I don't want to sit there and figure out what traces are bad. I know it's going to be shorts and traces, and RAM chips need to be switched, which I could do, but again, I don't want to spend 10 to 15 hours doing it when someone could do it in 2 or 4. But anyway, so I'm going to send that off. So I'm like, I need something else inside this machine. And so I start researching, and I find, well, the Mistercade is going to be perfect for this because I know it just has a JAMA board connector. And there's an very easy I ran into another video by Scarlet Sprites, which I don't know, you know who that is.
Yeah, sure.
But he's another arcade YouTuber mostly.
Sure.
And yeah, he has a video saying, I put it in my Neo Geo machine, this is how I did it. And I was like, well, this is perfect.
Yeah.
And it's literally, there's just one little adapter board. It's like $30 you get on eBay. And it allows you to go and change your Neo Geo cabinet over to a JAMA cabinet, which the Mistercade needs. And so I reached out to Mr. Add-ons. He said, yes, I'll get you one. And I was just super pumped. And he's like, wait, I have to get, some I can't remember what he called it. They were like trial run or first batches that were not in the batch that's actually coming, that's being released. Like any day now, there's this finally big release of the sales of them. It was a pre-release one, but I was like, I want to pay for it. I pay for my own money. I don't really want to. That's just like too big. Because again, I needed everything. Because I've got it right here. If you look at the Mistercade, it's of course this big, fat, fancy board. And if you're, I'll go through it here in a second. If you're used to like the Mister, because it's just like a Mister, only it's a slightly different build out. But it's got the DE.
There it is. Yeah. Okay.
Right there, the DE10 Nano, whatever device at the bottom. So I needed everything, and I was starting from scratch. So he's like, hey, and it was when I was going on my. It arrived when I was going over Halloween to the Billy Mitchell show with with my conference, and so I. It showed up when I was gone, and then I was like, well, good, because I don't really want to mess with it before I leave. And I came back, and I've been just on top of this thing. It's been just crazy because, again, like RGB modding, if you know nothing about Linux, or you're starting from scratch almost like I am, it can be a little overwhelming. Like if you don't know it at all. I've just been a big Windows baby my whole life, and only used that for the most part.
Linux.
Well, I don't know. Like
I
see, if I don't like watch somebody do it, clicking on something, I'll click on it wrong and just screw it up. So I wound up screwing up my SD card, messing with this thing so many times. I don't know. I just don't know. And so I was literally spending 6 hours banging my head against the wall with it. But my problem was the same problem I have with all this stuff. I wanted it to just be plug in, easy, ready to go, plug it in, it would just play the games, right? I didn't need to go do anything. So it's definitely not like that. And you're right. Once you do it and do it right, it's easy. And you just should. What I tried to do is I tried to ask Mr. Add-ons, just go ahead and have it updated, not add ROMs or anything, but have the cores and update it on there. And I didn't know how to use it. So I sat there and I was like, oh, well, what's this do? So I would go into the menus, and I'm sure change, and it's probably an easy fix if you knew what we were doing, but I learned the hard way, so I had to redo an SD card. And then since this is my first experience, I was like, well, first while people were yelling at me, stop showing that thing on a flat screen, because I was just before I wanted to put it in my machine and invest all that into it, I wanted to fully
you got to
test
set it up first,
because just like anything else, it's great, but it has so a normal Mister would have this, and then it would have like a top. Yeah,
the IO. There's an IO
like
board.
This, right?
A board that's the same size but would fit over the top.
Yeah, and then another board under it that usually has like USB headers. But the cool thing about the Mistercade is I think a lot of that's built into this top board now, where you've got 6 USB headers right here, and then all your buttons are built into this, kind of like the normal IO board, but you don't need the. You don't need the additional USB.
Yeah, it does look like a full replacement for it. You see audio out, the 2 RCA out, which is not on the not on the IO board.
And you've got audio, analog audio, and you got a potentiometer here that controls the audio.
I see
on
it.
The boards.
Oh, that's dope.
So it's a really high quality one. So you spin this and it'll control your manual. It'll control the audio out. So this thing's amazing. Yeah, you've got your JAMA board connector here, which is wired up for standard JAMA, and it will output. What you need to do is get into your Mister file and just have composite sync come out. Okay. And that's really the only thing, and it'll output composite sync. And what it does is the programming, or the Mister will put out the same style of video out of this analog output at the same time as this. That needs to match. So You have to have that C-Sync for the monitor.
Oh,
I guess.
okay. So it's got to be a C-Sync monitor as well.
It's got to be. Well, it's a composite. No, I see. I thought it was C-Sync, but then when I went into the files, it said composite video sync. So that's a little bit more forgiving than just straight C-Sync. But anyway, got to have that sync coming out of here. And then as long as this matches, or you can use this signal out of this VGA and convert it to a matching signal, which for me, I didn't actually have the cable to use out of that. I had to use an Extron. So I was able to just, keep the sync any way I want it through the Extron. So I hooked this up, and that's the first thing I asked. I finally got my way around the programming and got it cores loaded up, and it was working on that. And then I got it working on my PVMs and analog video out simultaneously with the HDMI out. And then I was finally like, well, it's time to get the JAMA board in. So I moved my arcade machine down into my basement. It was an unbelievable nightmare. And I'm sure that the video for that, I'm sure, is already out. And anybody who's watched that one is just going to be seeing some crazy stuff on how I get it down here. Because there's literally, I measured it. The top of the MVS is 5 inches from the ceiling. It was down
tight.
here.
It was tight.
Like literally no room, but it fits back in my corner perfectly where I've got it. But it's going to be awesome, because then again, I'm able to run this through it. And then one of the first things I was like, can you tell me? I was asking Mr. Addons, can you tell me if this will output 3 things at once? Three things. So you could have HDMI and analog video coming out, both the JAMA connector and the analog video out. And he's like, well, it's not supposed to do that, but I don't think it would be unsafe to do that. So I'm sure he's like already yelling at me after spending 2 days messing the thing up on my own by just being stupid with it. Then now I'm wanting to do things that aren't even known with it. So anyway, that's like the first thing I kept thinking about was once I got it finally in the machine, I got the machine put back together. I wanted to get the Mistercade in there. And,
so it's running off the 3 monitors right now. So it's in the
I've got so what I did was I hooked it up, and just to be a little bit safe, like I said, I used an Extron device out of here, so it would take the sync and then just tell me what the signal is on the front of the Extron.
Okay. All right.
And then I could just put it into the monitor. But I fired it up. It worked perfectly. Like I had all 3 displays going. So I was like, man, this is so awesome. Dope. Because you could take and have your JAMA connected, have a side display if that's this is just what I've done it with my own. You don't want to do this if you're risking or worried about your hardware, probably, I don't know. But to be able to have that and then ship out some other analog video, even if you did it like to an Extron device, and then you had that going out to all kinds of displays, right? You could have that analog video going out to 100 CRTs if you wanted. And then, the HDMI out, you could do capture, do anything really, streaming. It's just the possibilities for this device is just like all of a sudden it's like just blown me away, because it was just something that I had no experience with. I've just been completely overwhelmed and not overwhelmed in a good way on the design and like everything about it. So yes, it is something that lives up to the hype. And if you have any kind of an arcade machine right now, I just consider getting it, because even arcade boards are getting pricey and collectible, and they're every day. I mean, I got on Yotango, right? It's how you say it? His Patreon.
Hotego, yeah.
After
Hotego,
I got this hooked up. Hotego, yeah. And so I saw he tweeted this morning that he had 5 new arcade cores coming Friday. So that's tomorrow. So I'm like, awesome. I get 5 new games from an update, and I'll get to run them in the real hardware. I'm still working some kinks out of the whole thing. Like there's something going on with, I think my wiring is not right on my Player 2 in my machine. There's something that's either been shaken loose or one of the buttons isn't really working. So I just need to get a new micro switch in there. But I'm really excited because my kids love this thing, and the idea that having this go out to 3 different potentially displays or more it blows my mind. And it's like you don't have to have an extra scaler, you don't have to have this, and like the lag is just unreal low. It's just
I like depending on Mister.
I
know that like I could just use it. It's really small. I've got all the consoles in there. I know what's coming out of it if I'm doing some testing or something. I can rely on it. I'm like, cool. I'm going to connect it up. It's as good as a legit, genuine signal coming out of a Super Nintendo or a Genesis, and that it can just do that. And you just know that, like, if I'm testing something, well, of course I'm going to plug in the Mister, actually, rather than plug in an original console. I'm just going to plug in the Mister and. Yeah, you may be using it.
How much space you could save too, and just
literally
like
have.
not
I
having
literally
to.
have. I can't have anything in here. I've got whatever console I'm working on right now, and everything else has to go to the storage room. So, and I've got the Mister.
Well, it's. There's always been like I always thought it would be really cool to have like if you were limited on space, having a CRT with like a even just a Raspberry Pi hooked into it, and always have an input where it would like automatically feed that. Whatever you wanted to, and the Mistercade is like 10 times better than that. You know, could just do everything, and the fact that there's so many people behind the scenes actually supporting it. That's what I was really blown away. Was when I was having trouble, I had numerous chats open with people on Discord, on Twitter, and on other places where I was like, "What am I doing wrong?" You know what?
And people were helping you though. You found people helping you.
Exactly, and it's like because everybody that I talk to, there is a learning curve, right? Even you're going to have to learn something. You have to learn how to put the files on there. You have to learn how to use GitHub. I mean, that was my one of a lot of people probably. Mainstream people that aren't really into a lot of the stuff we're talking and deep into the scene have probably never used GitHub, or know what it is. So,
yeah, fair enough. But I mean, I guess if you're buying that, so you're getting Mister is getting to this weird level where it's getting so well known that it's not just hyper nerds who are buying it. It's sort of more regular retro collectors who have heard about this. Oh, Metal Jesus talked about it. Bob never shuts the fuck up about it. Oh, we're gonna so people people want to try it.
It's got that whole like early Apple computer craze. Look, early. It's a very hardware piece of hardware. Yeah. It's not like got a pretty shell. It's really dependent on what you want to do and what you want to invest in it. Well, it does have.
I've got mine here, and I don't even have a shell. I know Mr. Add-ons has some great ones, but I just found this cheap.
I just like that, though. I like the open look of it personally. That's something that I really think is cool. And the plexiglass, I think that's what I was thinking. I was like, what would I do with this one? Of course, this one just sits inside an arcade machine most of the time, so it's not really going to be seen. But those, I definitely probably will get another just regular standard Mister, I'm sure now, because once you have one, at least like the Mistercade, like I want another regular Mister too, because it's
you want
such
the regular
great,
thing, and also I've got a video coming up soon that I'm working on right now about the project that Mr. Add-ons has to lag test controllers, and I'm super interested in that.
Yeah.
And what they've essentially built is you have this Arduino, and the Arduino is connected to both the controller and the Mister. And so a loop kind of happens that the Arduino fires off a button press of the controller. You wire it into the controller. It fires off a button press, which then goes through its cable into the Mister. And then you're running custom, like a custom core on the Mister, which knows to report the information back to the Arduino. So the Arduino fires it off and brings it back. And that's how they're lag testing controllers. Because also Mister has a special mode that can like poll like 1,000 times a second, and so extremely high poll rate. And so you can use a Mister to work out the lag, and that's a lot of that's what I've been working on recently, is looking at lag end to end. And so I've got it, and then I think lag primarily comes from three places. It comes from a controller, it comes from a console or the system or the PC or whatever, and then it comes from a display. And if you've got other things in the middle, maybe it could be those two scalars, and you can, like the screen, I've got a time sleuth. So now I can work out the screen's lag. Cool. And then if I can work out the controller's lag with Mr. Add-ons, I know that bit. And I can work out total lag because you can film it with a high-speed button and you press it, and then when the guy jumps on the screen.
Yeah.
And you can use the maths then to work out how much lag is my PC introducing in the middle of this, and I don't know why I get a weird, like, I guess it's that total nerd out thing. Like, I want to know the latency. What the fuck does it matter? Who cares? You know, that it's one frame, 2 frames, but
like you say, that to me might be the most fun thing about this project. And altogether, it's not like where you're just given, for example, like the PlayStation 5, and it's just going to play PlayStation 5 games, and you don't, you're just buying it to do that, and it's going to have a couple other features as the store, but this is so raw and like open source and homebrew and all that stuff that what you're saying right there is like the capabilities behind the scenes of this machine to do so much more than what we already know. And it's like, are we into, say, 30% of what this thing can do, 20%? Are we even scratching the surface? Are we close to where we're going to need another device after this to work out what this can't do? I don't know. I mean, it's an exciting thing. It's exciting to think that there's new stuff being able to be added to this. Is this going to be capable of doing everything one day short of PlayStation 4 content? Is it going to be pushed to that point? I don't know. I mean, it's certainly exciting.
One thing I like about Mister is it's almost like there's a story and a lore around Mister, and the lore is Sorg, the original. I think his name's Sergey. The original guy who came up with the Mister framework, and he also, I believe, made the first designs for the first I/O board. So I think most people who are buying I/O boards or USB boards, I think they're also the ones who were designed by like the originator of the project, the boss, the OG Sorg. And it's almost like, and he's a little bit reclusive as well. Like, he's on the forums a lot, but also he's clearly a fucking genius. I mean, that's not in doubt. This dude's clearly a genius.
I don't even know, like, how did he even like?
He's like out of
like this
nowhere.
This machine. It's literally a machine that probably people didn't think a whole lot of the capabilities of it, and he's just
thought of it. And not only that, now is he's still working on it. Because Sorg is the one working on the Sega Saturn core, which looks like some black fucking magic. Like, to get the Saturn going.
I don't know. I mean,
but the boss, like the original, the head ninja, is taking on the hardest challenge himself in Mr. Land. And I like even that. He's mysterious. He never talks to us. Yet, he is doing the toughest work and making the Saturn core. Like, it's a good story. There's a story in it.
Well, it's all, and I think that, like, without sounding, if you really love this stuff, you need to be plugged in some way into these forums so you can follow this stuff without, or you do, hey, maybe we'll just make it so people just keep watching us, and we will just bring it to you if you don't want to go over there.
I think that's it. I mean, I was just in the last podcast talking to Lou.
We can just bring up, because we are, you and I know, are just like, probably become just we're on Twitter every day seeing at least what's going on, and there's a lot of things, I'm waiting on a lot of things to happen where it's like almost daily you could wait for an announcement and it just make your day go better, because you're like, well, I mean, especially right now, like we said, with part shortages and things, you get a Twitter notice that says something's available you've been waiting on, you go buy it. And then, like, that's an entire experience you just will miss if you're not plugged into that, because that's where people are going to, like, announce this.
That's
stuff,
where the community is. The community is still in these places now. The community hasn't naturally or unnaturally grown to some size that it's been overly commercialized. That there's these one, or that not even overly commercialized, like that big companies haven't taken it over, because big companies do slick shit. Big companies want to produce a lot of something, of course, and then make a nice website where you can buy everything at Walmart or something. But the community, the scene is still at a level where that's not where it's at, and that's, I mean, probably better. I don't know. I don't want to downgrade all the fantastic work that people are doing, these creators who are making things. Like, it feels good. I don't know if that's a bit weirdly elitist.
Yeah,
to be like, I'm in on the ground floor.
It's in a good place. I'm concerned that, like, it's almost such a good place. Like, you see every day, the corporations are going to get more and more pissed that they're not able to come in here and basically push their agendas on a educated marketplace. And again, this is a niche market, but again, most people in we're nerds. We tend to have we look at things differently, right? We're going to
I would say, like, if
scrutinizing things and wondering where this information's coming from. It's a lot of things are vetted, you know, through community involvement like this.
I was thinking about, like, what could stop it or what might be an issue. You're saying that it's still underground, so the companies are not paying notice, both good and bad. Good maybe in a way that, hey, some big company is not trying to slickly do something, but bad in that, well, in a way that, like, we're under Nintendo's radar. Like, if Nintendo decided that Mr. Project was a massive infringement of their copyright because everyone's playing Super Nintendo ROMs on it, I mean, it wouldn't be the craziest thing they've done in that anti-piracy
thing. That's the truth.
It's not unheard of that they would do something or other. I don't know, put pressure on Intel with the DE10 Nano. You know, if they decided it was a problem, there's a bunch. I mean, GitHub takedowns even trying to do that.
Yeah, well,
that's
something
Nintendo
that could always happen.
This.
But no, well, you're going to have the situation where they're thankfully they have enough, and I know this might be sounding, they got enough on their plate where coming down here, obviously, other than to control the essence of their copyrights, right? Other than that, I feel like they're obviously not interested in monetizing this segment of the community, right? I mean, they don't put any real effort into it. It feels like, for example, they get blasted for just dropping a N64 emulation that is highly criticized. Now, we're, of course, highly critical of it because it's coming from directly Nintendo, and it's not as good as other emulation they've done or anybody. I mean, there's people in the community that have done emulation of N64 for decades and have done a better job than what Nintendo released. And the funny thing is supposedly this emulation was worse than they even released before on Wii U or something. So you can tell that all they're doing is it's like they barely put enough effort in there to get a little money and remain relevant in the scene. And then the only time you really hear anything big about them is where they'll go after either a hacker or a ROM website, again, to protect their intellectual property. But then at the same time, they don't really have any desire. I think that the big thing for most of us that are enthusiasts about this stuff is not that we're going to lose and our kids are ever going to miss out on the experience of playing Super Mario, right? Nintendo will always provide an outlet for you to play their top 20, 50 games. But what about beyond that? Those ones that they technically own the rights to and they don't, but they will never do anything with it, right? And that might be the one game that was important to you as a kid. And it's like the only way you'll ever experience this is go find the physical cart. Well, now you know, with the way people get about collectible items, it's like it's nuts. That's not a real thing. But again, at the same time, what are you going to do? Nintendo's, I mean, if somebody wants to come cause trouble in litigation, they can, right? They can do it if they want to. I mean, there's the original hardware is gonna. I was thinking a lot about the market thing because I've really been trying to learn. I think we talked about it previously that I've been learning a lot from the Reserved Investments YouTube channel, and that guy Sean. I think he's tremendous. Like his ability to break down the market and say, "Hey, here's what I know about this segment and that segment. Here's what I know about antiques. Here's why your video games are, yes, you might make money making video games, but don't call it an investment. It's not an investment. You're just flipping video games right now. Don't get it wrong." And what he's taught me about the market and the ability for things to be on the market and why aren't those things there. It's, I learned a lot. Well, and I'm sure that, and this is an important part of really market research, is any time that like, you get almost that big brother approach by a company to come in and even like rightfully seize their intellectual property. if it's a big brother approach, then there's going to be a swell of underground, movement to preserve the ability to do that. So the first thing you do is you have a big reaction from a company, and then there's going to be a swell, again, like when the word was getting out that Nintendo was going to chomp down on the ROM sites, right? Immediately everybody's going to probably be concerned about their ROM sets and trying to find the right place, and then you're
stored on
about,
USB discs,
right? And he's like, "Oh, I got mine, I got it backed up, triple backed up." But anyway, it's like, at what point, anytime that you do, and you can see it was just like anything, anytime you do something from an authoritarian point of view, there's a natural human reaction that some subset of the society is going to be like, no, thank you, right? And they're going to do their own approach to something.
Certainly,
they
that's
may
pretty obvious in the world
differently.
today, right
it's
now.
like, right. I mean, it's not like we don't even have to get deep into anything.
People are going to resist.
It's not. That's, I mean, and that's like, we're talking about something here that's been around since the beginning of time, probably, right? That's all psychological stuff. So that's not changing. And but like you say, I'm not saying certain things because I don't want to give people, not saying that they already don't have these ideas, but not smart people at Nintendo. I don't want to give them any more ideas on coming after anybody, because it seems like they've already been, pretty much doing a lot of that. And it is unfortunate. I feel like sometimes the most frustrating thing, I think, to me is where somebody does an incredible job of maybe changing a ROM or updating a ROM or hacking a ROM or making like the new I never played them, but there were some people that were making Metroid games, right? Like basically their own Metroid games for the Super Nintendo that could play on original hardware, but then Nintendo finds out about it and gets pissed off because you're making a new story with their IP. And like we're talking about it, and it makes sense. But you, at the same time, you're like, why don't companies have the wherewithal to instead turn this around and every once in a while throw the community a bone? And I mean by like acknowledging this great hack, right? And then hiring this guy to do something, or gal to do what, their own version of something, and actually producing it on Nintendo. And how, if companies would do things like that, then I think they would get a lot more credibility, right? If you were like, well, we busted this pirate, instead it's like the movie Catch Me If You Can, where at the end of the day, the FBI hires the guy who's conning everybody.
Sure, but you know who hires? Right? Okay, FBI. You know which country the FBI works in? America. I think that there are, and I mean it with respect, but I do think that there's cultural differences in the way that companies act towards their people. Nintendo has just never traditionally worked like that. They have a different relationship to their Japanese fan base, I dare say, to the way that like Microsoft reacts to American fan base. And I dare say, and again, I'm not trying to be rude to no one, like it's just sort of Nintendo's way of like, we give you that is, I don't know, maybe something's expected or something. It's in Western culture where, I don't know, I'm not going to say like we question it more. It's not that. It's, we want a different interaction with our company, I think, than Japanese people do now. I think, I'm sure things are changing, and I think around the world things are merging in styles, but there's some cultural going on there,
though, and there's always that. That's always going to be a factor, right? Especially like you say, on certain, you can tell with certain companies and the way they've done things in the past and how they have. Of course, it's always been said, what's the company's culture, right? So they're going to, like you say, stay along those lines of protecting that IP. And again, it would be maybe too much out of the box for them to go and say, well, you were a dang good developer, let's hire you on. Whereas back in the day, this was happening, and you would have so much competition, and there would be these rogue, not saying that there aren't now, but rogue game development companies that would be like, yes, we need you, we want you. And then you play up the, like, almost like a wrestling persona, wrestling, I guess you call it, when we were down here in this south of United States. But it's like, it's a show almost, where you're like, you're going to get as much publicity out of this as anything. But now, I wonder, like, don't you think that would have been people that would have taken that approach in early tech days to get noticed? You like get noticed by doing something. Well, you either send in a good program or like
so you hack something, you have to make something,
right? And then you're like, oh wow, this guy is so good. He has to be in charge of the security for our company.
Or what was the classic? Yeah.
So that's happened behind the scenes, but again, it doesn't. Yeah, like you say, Nintendo. I can't think of a single instance where they would have actually done what we brought up, and that's the company that is. It's a 50-year game.
There is
one
example
Nintendo.
of that crossing of cultures is the story that apparently when John Carmack from id Software, they originally made a version of Super Mario Brothers for the PC just to prove that it could be done, and made it, and apparently it's amazing. It never leaked, and they showed it to Nintendo, and Nintendo went, nah. So Carmack's doing it the American way, right on. He's doing it the American way, which is like, here's how I'm going to copy your shit, make it the same, and you're going to be like, oh shit. And the Japanese went, nah, no PC.
Yeah, it's just, that's, so yeah, like you say, they're going to do that. And see, back in the days, and it still probably happens today, then you'll get, people will do that to get a name for themselves. And if you don't get hired by the person you attack, you get hired by his competitors because
you're not going to. Hey, Sonny will be on your doorstep like, hey, we got a indie platform.
Yeah,
I mean,
maybe,
then
right,
again,
exactly.
Fair enough. I was sort of using broad strokes at Japanese culture there. However, I know Sony did a lot of stuff to bring in developers. Let's say the original PlayStation 1, part of the reason it was so successful is because it was easy.
Right. They worked
People
with
were
Nintendo
sick of fucking Nintendo. And they're like, it's got to be a cartridge, and we've got to hand you our cartridges, and we're going to restrict it. Yeah. And Sony just went, we want developers, and gave them easy-to-use tools. And so, okay, there was an example of a Japanese company using that style, well, against another Japanese company, I guess. But, hey.
Right, yeah, and then Sony's always been Sony's an interesting company because it's like that with most of their stuff. They always are kind of in the marketplace, and it's just like with the CRTs. Are they going to take that leap? They are willing to risk big stuff.
Yeah, and they can take falls
to come in and make themselves a presence in a marketplace. They didn't particularly start the market, but it's just like video games. You could credit, of course, like Atari and those early consoles, but a lot of video game culture that we're talking about is from Nintendo, not just because they've been constantly there. And then PlayStation, they came in, that's after all these, they're having constant console wars and everything, and they're just coming out of nowhere. And even started with Nintendo, right on that PlayStation /
oh, that's right, the cross
was a Super Nintendo, that super rare machine. And eventually they leave the floor, right? Because they're not going to get
if the story is to be believed.
It's just moving towards the disc-based systems and things.
If the story
of the next
is
technology.
to be believed, so they say the way it goes down between Nintendo and Sony, and then Philips was in there as well. If the story is to believe, Nintendo was super fucking rude to Sony, like super rude.
I'm sure they were, right? Because Sony's coming in, and they have no
console.
No console, right? Never.
So you imagine, but imagine that. If you're disrespectful, where does your disrespect get you? You know what it got? A massive fucking competitor over the last 20 years or whatever since it was been since then.
And now so everything revolves pretty much around Sony, as much as as much as the rest of the companies are. It seems like whatever Sony does now, it's hard for them to make a real mistake, right? As compared to the other companies, which will come out with products
it's just
that don't
their size, their
picked up or have
ability to create.
It's like
things.
the Sony is always there now and doing it right, but if you think about the TV market, Sony was not even making tube televisions till they had already been sold for. It was the 60s, so they had been on the marketplace for 30 years at this point. Not color TVs, but TVs themselves had been, and they came into that, and they spent almost bankrupted the company. And they spent years, the first couple of years, trying to develop a new tube to make it a competitive edge, better, cheaper, and less work on the end. But at the beginning, it was so expensive.
Didn't they?
It almost broke the
Didn't
company.
they buy someone?
So I can imagine that.
Wasn't that
I can imagine that
technology
mindset
bought from someone?
jumping
Well,
out.
maybe it was one of your videos that taught me this.
Yeah, so there
They
was
eventually
a switch.
bought
Yeah,
it in.
it was yeah. According to this history, it's like a chromatron is what the original was called. It was at a trade show, a long time ago, trade show.
And Sony just said, "Yep, we'll take that."
They saw it and they said, "Yes, that's what we want," because their whole idea was the whole thing back then was getting these 3 beams to converge in one to make your primary colors. That's what all shadow masks are. They are the electron gun that shoots out, emits electrons, and it's from a cathode. That's why it's called cathode-ray. So it sends that cathode out, those electrons, in 3 individual lines for your primary colors, red, green, blue. Sony was like, that takes it. It did. The early TVs were notorious for somebody like me. Like each company, like RCA, would have 100 guys like me hired, to sit there and wait for these TVs to come off the production lines, and I'd have to sit there adjusting convergence rings, right, and magnets on the back of the tube in the 50s, and I can sit there for 5 hours screwing with the television before it even makes it to your house, right, or the sales floor. So that was very common, and Sony was like, we got to do this differently, and we can just kill our competition if we get it right, because they knew that if the thing was on the chromatron, by aligning the beams and getting them to shoot through a single beam, you're eliminating all this error by them shooting out beside each other and crossing paths, and it's harder to get all those things, in line with that. So that was how they did it. They had to actually, their original design they bought wasn't good enough. They never could make it cheaper, and they had to redesign it. And it took them like 2 years. They took 30 engineers and put them on the project. And after a while, they finally came out with the Trinitron. And that changed everything. Once the real Trinitron was out, Sony, it's just like the PlayStation 2. It's like it hit, it worked, and then Sony never looked back. And so they went from being, hey, we're about to break our company. It's about to go bankrupt because you guys tried this Chromatron thing, to we're kings of the television. Same thing. It's like, you could see it again. So it repeats itself in the gaming industry. Fast forward to the 1990s, right? So you're going 30 years later. That's when that's when the Trinitron tube.
Right about then, they needed something else.
Would have been in the time.
They need something
right,
else.
The time they needed something new, right? They needed a new crutch for the company. And how amazing is that? Maybe we're just like flies on the wall, making up our own.
They got to sell
ideas
TVs,
on what's going on in the walls of these companies. But it's probably how it all worked, right? They run out of one product.
Well, they could keep on making TVs.
You can't live by it
CRTs
forever.
are out, but then they got LCD.
Oh, they did?
OLED. Steve, we've been going an hour here.
Yeah.
It's
all
going
right.
good. We got 2 episodes in the bag. Nice. So I've been trying to think about how to, when we're publishing these episodes, however, like how to tell people, like, because we want questions, right? We want people to write in, and we would love CRT questions or general tech questions. You hear the topics we talk about, but I guess particularly CRT stuff.
Really anything that, CRTs for sure, absolutely. And also, but I feel like anything that's kind of in our retro tech world, because we didn't even talk in this episode about anything that
we got more time. We got more
to
episodes.
get to. And we could do that next time, talk about like some of the controller adapters and other things. And it's just like, they'll always, if there's anything, I mean, it could be really anything. I don't care. Yeah, we should have a spot. Obviously,
we'd like to. I think there's a lot of people who want to hear your thoughts on things on different CRTs, because the whole point of the last episode was just, the whole point of the RGB modding thing was every TV is fucking different. They're all different, and I can even attest from the European side. Okay, I find a TV, right, and I've got to look up the service manual. There's freaking 12 variations of it, because there's the Italian one, the German one, and I don't know if the language was different or there were slight different specifications in why they would need the Italian variant and the Polish variant.
Well, like when you did the special on one of your first videos about that,
right? The Soviet Union master system. Yeah, why do they
based? Master System where it had to be able to put out CCAM, and
It's
they even have
crazy
their
in the
own
middle of all of this.
regional thing, and then so they're like, again, I couldn't imagine being in the corporate boardroom of a company that's like, okay, we'll
Italy,
make
for
a
Germany.
specific one. How could you be so desperate to be like, we have to make? I guess we can't get these things sold, but that's not true with the Master System.
Another thing I want
is
to
everywhere
as well, trying to communicate over the next few episodes. I know it'll take time. It's not like all the questions come necessarily straight away. But what I want to something I want to explore in this podcast with you is you've done a really good job with the price watch. I love it. I know loads of people are really into it, find it fascinating. And you can do it. And I know you only do eBay, so you can get the results in one easy to get place. You do, and you have certain parameters. America, which implies, because in America, the thing is you have shipping, you have those options. Europe, so what I'm interested in is exploring CRTs in Europe more, and I think it's going to take hearing a lot more stories from people, because there isn't this information in one place. Because Europe is a whole bunch of countries, everyone's got their own local system. There's not really, we don't really have a European system, we just have eBay. But I suspect, my suspicion is that the vast majorities of PVMs and BVMs, CRTs being sold in Europe are not sold off eBay. It's more local. It's more, can you drive to the person? It's still the underground contacts of broadcast companies and stuff like that. So there's a real difference in the market and the ability to get them between our two continents, right? And I think America is a bit easier for you at least gather that info. eBay is there. You've got unified shipping options. You can get somewhat. Yes. Okay. Well, somewhat.
Well, like the eBay stuff, I try to keep it there so that people can, if they want to, and they see that video, then most of the time they can go back and actually find the listing. Because I get lots of people that will tell me, hey, I bought a PVM. Can you add it? And I don't tend to add those to my knowledge, except for most of the time they're pretty much in the same price bracket anyway, except for somebody will find one that's local and you still get a good deal, right? But it's I think it would be more fun too, to have people, even a way for them to explain maybe how they are getting them, and talking deeper into what market happens, so we could have the market watch, but then also explore other areas of the market where these exchanges are happening.
Anywhere in the world.
Where I live too, there are other ways that people are buying these, and those are smarter ways. The thing about eBay is it's so much, it's like a compiler of data, and that the transaction at least was started or happened in some way. And, it's obviously got a lot of data in one spot that's more, trackable and things like that. I've tried other ways, but it's a lot harder to verify that information besides somebody just sending you a message or an email saying they bought something for a certain amount of money. But I think that's a great place to explore where what people are having to do to get PVMs in other areas, because I also talk to people that are like kind of in deserts. And what I mean by a desert is you're either in two types of deserts. It's a desert where you can't find any good CRT, right? There's that desert. And then there's the opposite desert where you're the only one in the CRT scene within like 100 miles of you. And you're so out there on your own, and you're surrounded by like PVMs and BVMs. I know a guy like this, it's been a long time supporter of the show, and he's in Kuwait. And he has shipping containers just filled with BVMs, PVMs. And the thing is, in his country, nobody went and got them, right? Nobody went and got them from the storage places. So they're just like, yes, come and get 100 of them.
Let's get on a flight. Let's go.
But he's so but he's so far out there on his own. It's such a difficult travel. And again, you'd have to have somebody who's almost like an exporter in goods to know. And then, now with shipping and things, it's like a joke to think.
I know a guy.
I've got the plan.
Steve.
You know a guy.
I'm living in the former Soviet Union, all right? I've learned a few tricks. I know the plan.
Yeah,
I know
yes,
a guy.
there we go.
I know a
Little
guy
side of
who
rules.
is former logistics. I know a guy who's former logistics in the Estonian army.
Yeah.
So he knows about moving.
Well,
he
this
needs
is
moving
exactly
stuff around
what
the world.
it needs.
We go
is
over there to
something like that,
Kuwait.
because this
You
is
have a little time with your friend. I'm sure he's a delightful guy.
Exactly.
He gets his cut.
He's got tons of it.
He can't do anything with it.
He can't do anything with it. He's got it's an opposite
We can
desert
do
where
this.
you're stuck in an ocean
Oh.
of materials, and you got. But then again, you have to get somebody to be able to be like, okay, we got all this stuff organized. Now, did you remember to go put them all?
Yeah. How are you going to get
Packaged
that
correctly
many?
in a sea container? Like, well, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not going to answer my phone that day, right? And you're like, well, we just got 4 countries involved. We got customs, So I just, it's also, I know this isn't something we often think about, but you can get into a trouble with customs on shipping a CRT.
Probably.
I know it sounds nuts, but some countries have it on a list of it being basically a EPA, or I mean not EPA because that's not in other countries, but an environmental hazard and hazardous waste, because there's a big, e-waste was shipped across basically from here in the Western world, was shipped to the third world where it was dumped and then left for people to salvage through.
It could be. I mean, that's a really good point about
smuggling
bringing
of
because
items.
the European
it's like,
Union is
and then,
nuts. They got
right.
it's like sometimes like a hard border, and we have a strong like VAT. So there might be.
Well, that's what the difference is between like your area and my area. We have states where you
Free
can
America.
just travel interstates.
One up
right,
for
and
America.
go-
I can import a BVM.
And you could go you can go drive to another place that's 300 or 400 miles away and not have to worry about that. Whereas, like you say, you're going to go across 3 or 4 borders, and they're not going to have the same idea about what you're doing.
Well,
They
I've
might
heard
have
that
different things going on.
the even some of the
locally.
chemicals that are involved in the creation of CRT, like you can't have a CRT factory, you can't have a
Lead and
CRT factory in
phosphors
the
and
European
all
Union.
this stuff.
Straight up, like it's just wouldn't
No.
be allowed right now.
You could never do that. I don't know anywhere in the world, unless for some reason some
Kim
world
Jong-un
power was
loves
super
fucking
intent
CRTs,
on
bro.
reopening a CRT.
He's
Yes,
playing
that's-
all day long. Doesn't give a shit about the missiles.
That could you imagine? That would be the only way. That like people would be like, oh, and did you see the boat going?
He
over
loves
to
it. He's got a
North
big
Korea?
screen.
It was Dennis Rodman and Steve from Retro
Oh, you're gonna get a
Tech to
call
go
up
fix
from
the
Kim Jong. He's
CRTs.
gonna
It's
send
like,
you
oh,
over.
gosh.
Yeah, fix up.
Yeah, right.
He's
there
got
we
those
go.
60 CRTs
Like that would
in
happen.
there, and he's got a.
Gosh. Yeah, I bet he's like, I've got 48 NECs all lined up on top of each other for the most amazing Mario Kart and Smash tournaments you could ever imagine. So yeah, it's definitely something to think about, because even if you go in and ship something like through FedEx or normal interstate shipper, there are. I'm concerned about even shipping them, because there's always a chance they could deny it based on their little speak in their legal documents, where they do say, "Is this hazardous?" And if you say no, well, why'd you say no? Because it is hazardous. I mean, it's been like determined to be hazardous by the EPA. It's like legally hazardous. So they could just at the end of the day say, you had it packed perfectly and
hazardous
we did
waste. Yeah,
everything
you
wrong,
declared
but,
you declared the
it's
form wrong.
hazardous waste and we did everything wrong, but
You put
it's
us
hazardous
you put
waste.
us
You
in-
don't.
in-
We don't.
in
We don't
damage-
cover
in
your
harm's
hazardous
way.
waste in
So
any
we should sue you.
way, shape. We don't cover your hazardous waste in any way, shape, or form.
All right, Steve. I gotta leave it here, buddy. I gotta get some dinner, and I got some steak. It's been my day off. I'm gonna have another beer. I'm gonna eat the steak. I have been working too hard. Well, first of all, stay on the line, Steve. I'll just end the recording. So thanks very much for listening to our second episode. And if you want to ask some questions, please write us in the chat, write in the comments. We'll get it to you. Don't worry, we'll work this out.